Hello humans! I hope everyone's doing well. So this is the Water Bee prac. It's a self-guided prac, and part of it doesn't necessarily relate directly to water. The second part will. I'll actually have you plot up some data related to stratification in a model water column. But one of the intentions of this prac is to provide some of the soft skills that are essential when it comes to presenting and communicating scientific data. And so that's illustrating data, plotting data, and making it very aesthetic and clear, easy for the audience to understand. And this is going to be really important when it comes time for you all to submit your final scientific report at the end of the year in this unit. But it's also going to be very handy for the Water A prac, and I'm sure many others that will arise in this unit. So I thought about creating a custom video for this, but then I realized there's a wealth of information out there already on the web about how to make quality figures using Excel. So I selected a video, and I'll put a link to this original video in the description. But what I want to do here is play this video because somebody's already gone through and done a lot of these things that I think are really important. But whenever there's something that I don't agree with or I think is perhaps outdated a little bit, this video is about 4 years old now, I'll pause the video and discuss. Alright, so let's see what they have to say.
Okay, so in this video what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to take this very basic scatter plot graph that I made and make it look a little bit more like what you would see in a research publication in a field like physiology, which is my field. So this is just, again, a basic Excel graph, but typically researchers will use specialized software to do their graphs, and it makes a very different looking graph. And so when you see this, it just lacks a little bit of that sort of polished finish that those other programs would do by default or with minimal effort. So it takes a little bit more to get this Excel version to that, but I'll show you how to get as close as I think you can with Excel. All right, so first of all,
so this author implies that there's problems with Excel when it comes to creating quality figures, and he's mostly right there. So you might wonder why we're using Excel. Well, the reason we're using Excel is because Excel is phenomenal for organizing data and doing calculations and analyzing data. But when it comes to preparing figures, it can be a bit clunky at times. However, Excel is one of these programs that you will need to be moderately familiar with if you go into a scientific field, and or many fields, not even just science fields. Excel is a skill that you will almost certainly need in a professional career. And I don't see the need to mandate or require that you all learn an entirely new graphical illustrative program for this unit. We can get what we need with Excel, but it takes a little modification, as we'll see soon.
With this basic graph here, in any sort of research publication, you're not going to usually see a title on a graph, because it's going to have a description below it that's going to talk about what the graph is, and it's also going to have a results section that tells you all about the graph or all about the data and refer to the graph as well. So first thing, let's just delete this, and that provides a larger space for the data itself, which is what the most important thing in a graph is. So you always want to give as much space to the data as you can.
Yes, so I completely agree with that. Chart titles are pretty much useless, so delete them. The reason why they're useless is because they often take up space that is better used for presenting your data. That's the first point. And secondly, the description of the data or the plot or what it shows is going to appear in the figure caption. Okay, so the figure caption isn't something that you'll need in the What are APRAC. However, again, like in the scientific report that will be required at the end of this unit, you will be expected to have figure captions. And so a figure caption is just a little bit of text, usually a couple of sentences directly below the figure, which gives the figure a name. Usually it's like figure 1, 2, etc. And then a brief description.
Another thing that you're going to probably want to do is most of the time research graphs do not, or research manuscripts and papers and do not have these these grid lines behind the data. So we can click that, like I just did, shows that these circles here show that I have it clicked, and then hit delete. So that deleted the vertical ones. We can also do the same thing on the horizontal ones. Let's see if it'll, there we go. So make sure that you have these little circles on the lines, or otherwise you have something else highlighted, and then hit delete. Alright, so a little bit better already.
So I completely agree. In this case, grid lines, again, like this is somewhat a matter of opinion, but I think grid lines add extra clutter, and rarely will somebody require a grid line on a plot in order to, follow the line and see the exact numerical value of some dot on there, right? Normally the raw data will be presented in a table elsewhere. So I think the figures will look a lot cleaner if you remove the grid lines.
Another thing that we need to do though is typically you're not going to see color in graphs that are produced for research publications, because it costs more money to print those, and most people aren't going to print your papers that you publish using a color printer. They're going to use whatever printer is easily available to them at work, which is usually just going to have black ink in it. So let's get rid of the color, turn it to black, just so it prints better and so it doesn't cost any additional money to submit it. So if you, let me back out for a second.
So just a quick note here about color. This person points to color being an issue when you print out manuscripts or print out figures. Yes, we probably know that color ink is more expensive than black ink. If you can get away with using nothing but black, that's fine. But nowadays, again, this is where I think the video is a little bit outdated, because a lot of professional journals nowadays do not charge extra for having figures in color. And the reason for that is because libraries and readers don't have hard copies, actual printed copies of journal articles anymore. In fact, I can't even remember well, yeah, I can, but it's been years since I've actually printed out a paper in color and read it. I do most of my reading online, and I think that's probably the case for most people nowadays. So I would actually encourage the use of color, but only when it adds to the presentation of the data. So one example would be where you're plotting two data sets on a single plot. And in that case, when you have two colors that are somewhat contrasting, I think that can be quite helpful to make a distinction between the two different data sets. Figures do not have to be boring and monochromatic, okay? So they can have a little bit of flair, but you should avoid using extravagant or bright colors. In particular, like a bright yellow color tends to display poorly. So avoid that. Avoid like the neon colors like bright yellow, green, and pink, etc. It's usually good to use darker colors with a dark undertone. It enhances the visibility.
Click the graph, it brings up these chart tools. And then if you click on the data, so click on one of the data points, notice that they're all highlighted now. Let's see if we can do a right click and then format data series. And so it's going to bring up this little side menu. Click the thing that looks like a paint bucket, and that's going to allow you to change what the individual data markers look like. So data points, they call them data markers here. So do the fill, and then this will change it so the inside of the data points are also black. Alright, so I'll click off now so you can see what I did. So these are now all black. It's going to be a lot better when it prints, and also it matches.
So this is perhaps a minor point, but there is an inner fill for data points and an outer stroke or line that goes around them. And again, this is a matter of preference. I'm not requiring any particular style, but in the example that you see now, these are just plain black circles. But sometimes I think it looks quite nice whenever you have an inner fill color, such as, let's just say blue, for example, and then an outer black line encapsulating that circle. That really helps the data points stand out. But again, that's a matter of my opinion. I'm not going to require it.
Which is, again, that appearance that we're used to seeing when we see research articles. So we need to do the same thing for all the other elements of this, where we need to turn it into a nice bold black color. Because for whatever reason, this version of Excel, and probably whatever version that you're going to use, is going to like this sort of gray, this mild to dark gray color that you don't ever see this in again, a publication. I guess it just has a softer look that Microsoft likes, but it doesn't work for us. So let's do this one at a time. So I just clicked the line, the best fit line, and let's change the color of that. Do the same thing, go to the paint bucket, go to this little drop down by the paint bucket again, and click black.
Okay, so this gentleman, has his preference here about having a solid line with 2 points thickness. I'm not going to be too picky about this. Sometimes I think dotted lines look good, other times solid lines. I mean, it kind of depends. It is good to have the lines in general to have a thickness greater than 1, and I think he talks about this a bit more in a moment. But I'm not going to be too picky on that, as long as it's very clear that there is a trend line and where it is.
And so then let's go and change each of the lines. So the line that this y-axis line, as well as this x-axis line, let's change those to black. Let's also make them a little thicker. So let's see, here's the line, change that to black, and it's at 0.75. I like to change all my lines to about 2 for 2 points. It just makes it have that bolded appearance. And so let's do the same thing to x-axis, change it to black, and increase the point to 2.
Okay, so, well, ticks are being shown here, but before we talk about ticks, I agree that the axis lines should be black rather than some weird shade of gray. The black really helps it stand out a bit better against the white background. Now, you can also set the thickness of the axis lines and tick points and trend lines, or any sort of line art there. I think, yeah, at least in this example, the default was 0.75 font. I don't know if that carries over to all versions of Excel. But I think the line thickness should be between 1 point and 2 point. If it's less than 1 point in thickness, it just looks a little too thin. If it's more than 2 point in thickness, I think it looks a bit obnoxious. So try to get it somewhere in between there. And I think, again, black versus gray makes for a more aesthetic graph. Now, the point here about outside ticks. So tick marks, I think, are really important. I don't know if they're on there by default or not once you remove the grid lines, but do include tick marks on your figures. Now, whether you have the tick marks pointing inside versus outside. So in this example, they're pointing outside, so the little tick mark is pointing outward towards the tick labels. That makes no difference to me. Use what you prefer. I think the plots look better with the ticks pointing inward, but again, that's just my preference. I'm not going to deduct points if you choose otherwise.
Okay, now let's go and let's change the lettering so that they're bold and they're black. So we'll do the numbers first, so click the axis, then to change any lettering or numbering, you're going to want to use this upper left menu, so we don't even need this format axis menu here. So go to the letter icon, go to the drop down and click black. So now these are black. And we should also make them bold, so click the bold, and now they're bolded. And we'll do that to all the letters and numbers. So make it black, make it bold, and let's also make the...
So I kind of agree with this as well. I don't like the gray. It's better to have really nice, clear contrast. Black text on a white background. I mean, do you ever write a document and use like some weird shade of gray for your text? No, you don't. It's always black, right? And that's because it's much easier to read. It's easier on the eye. So again, it should be black. It looks a lot better. Now, with regards to font size, again, this depends on the discipline, people's personal preferences. Specific publications have different guidelines, but in general, something like 10 or 12 point font for tick labels is sufficient, and something like 14 point font for axes labels is preferred. The only thing that I think is important is that the axis labels are a larger font than, or larger size than the tick labels. And when it comes to axis labels, this is really important, and I will take off points for this. You must show your units for the data that you're plotting. Okay, so the axis label should very succinctly state what the variable is and what its units are.
The word text bigger, I like something around like a 14 point font, and then let's do that to the x-axis too. So make it black, make it bold, black and bold, and 14 point font. There we go. So at this point, I think this is a reasonable graph. It might not look exactly like the graphs you see from professional high-level graphing programs, but it's pretty good, and most people are going to look at it and not realize it's in Excel, and although that sounds a little pretentious, in the research world, something that looks like it's from Excel is probably going to make you look a little less sophisticated and polished, and so if you do this, you can probably fool a lot of people to make it look like it you did some or had some sort of specialized software. Now, the next step to getting a graph from Excel.
Okay, no need to try to fool anybody. Just make a nice plot. Okay, you can make very nice figures in Excel, and I think in this video it's nicely shown how to do that. If you know how to use other graphical illustrative types of software like maybe Adobe Illustrator, by all means, feel free to do that. I don't want to tell anybody what they can't do, but you can prepare a lovely figure using Excel, for the purposes of this class and for preparing quality figures for your practical reports as well as the final report.
Excel to whatever format you need to submit it somewhere is to export it. Now, this is going to be a little bit of an issue because Microsoft Office, all the programs in Microsoft Office, including Excel, including PowerPoint, including Word, are going to export with a low dots per square inch. So it's not going to look all that good. It's going to be a little bit on the blurry side. I do have a workaround for this. It's a little involved. It requires changing some registry numbers, so it does require a little bit of confidence in your skills working in the sort of the background of your Windows operating system.
Don't worry, I won't make you do that.
But I'll give you a link in the text below to that, and it's something that's worthwhile if you're going to be doing a lot of this kind of work. All right, hope that helped. Thank you.
Okay, so look, the resolution will be fine. That last little bit, don't worry much about that. It'll be perfectly fine if you copy the plot in Excel and then you can paste it into a Word document. The resolution will be just great. Okay, so look, this was just one way to go about it. I think this is nice because typically scatter plots like this are going to be the types of data that you'll be presenting most often. But there's a great deal of information out there, so feel free to search around a bit more. And with that, I'll leave you to it. Looking forward to seeing some lovely plots. Bye.